Welcome back to Natural 2, our unscripted D&D and tabletop talk show. I'm James, he's Nathan, and I don't think I often remember to say who we are. I don't often remember to introduce us as actual people.
hmm
It's all about the work. It's all about the
It's all about the content, man. The meat.
the mission. It's all about our mission. So today, this week, we are going to talk about a subject that I am personally enthusiastic about, which is stealing, thieving, being a robber, taking good things that other people have and making them yours. And as we talk about it's going to be it's a straightforward idea. It's a straightforward concept once you get into it. But I had to be told in the early days when I was really just getting started with D&D, especially the first time I was preparing to run a game, I kind of had to be told that it was something that I should do in order to make the game better. And what I'm referring to is literally it kind of actually is stealing. I'm going to talk about why it isn't plagiarism in all seriousness. I'm not going to get hung up on dictionary definitions or anything like that, but I do think there's a line between taking inspiration or taking themes or taking the arc of a plot and integrating it into your game or your story, whatever the case may be. There's a line between that and plagiarism.
hmm
And I think that it's something that you sort of feel, like, rather than getting bogged down in any precise definitions. You know when something is a ripoff versus an homage. But for starters, I want to give an example. So Pinocchio, My Fair Lady, the Ryan Reynolds movie Just Friends, and two movies that came out in the same year, She's All That and Never Been Kissed. Those both of those movies came out in '99. They came out at the same time, practically. All those movies are at the basic level the same story.
hmm
They're all Pygmalion, which is Greek myth, if you're not familiar. And from that Greek myth, Pygmalion have spawned. I listed 5 movies. There are way, way more, and there are episodes of TV shows that are based on the idea. It's something that is evergreen. It's always coming back. Uh, and my message for our episode this time is that not only is it okay, it's a good idea for you to do the same thing in the game that you are running, to find themes or story beats, the vibe, or the even just an idea for a cool magic item in other things that you like, and put them in there, put them in the game. Um, what keeps it from being plagiarism, in my opinion, is first of all to put your own spin on it if you can. It's not strictly necessary. You can straight up rip something off if you want to, considering that it's probably just for an audience of 4 people that are your friends. Um, so I'm not even really saying not to do that. But if you want to be A plus, then take that, whatever it is, that thing that jumped out at you and said, "Ooh, that would be good in the D&D game," and do something to make it your own. In those same 5 movies that I listed, the basic story, the basic elements of the story are nearly identical, but they're still very different movies. Once you get the whole picture, once you get the whole thing, I'm not gonna say that. I'm not gonna tell you that Just Friends is a remake of She's All That, even though the stories have the same root. They're different movies,
Mhm.
and so that train of thought, that kind of thinking, is what I am, I guess, preaching to dear viewers right now. And telling you not only that you have permission to do it, but that it's a good idea to do it. Um, I've been talking for a minute. Why don't you jump in here, Nathan?
Yeah. I think the line that you ride, or at least like where my fear initially comes from when you borrow or take inspiration or steal from other pieces of media or other, I don't know, like games or books, or I guess it falls under media. But anyway, it is recognition. Like once either you or your players or whatever audience you have can recognize the fact that you are just taking something and plopping it down into your universe or your game or your world, then that is where I feel like you have done something wrong or maybe you've taken a misstep. And that was, again, my main fear kind of doing it initially, where I thought if I brought in some concept or even like a god that vaguely resembled another god in like the Forgotten Realms universe or something of that nature, that the player was going to immediately realize the fact that what I'm presenting them isn't fresh, isn't original, isn't from my imagination. And they're going to start guessing, like, oh, I bet he pulled this from that, and even making connections that aren't even really there. And that was, again, always my fear. Once you become comfortable kind of pushing that to the back of your mind and realizing that your players want to be immersed, they're not really looking for an avenue to pull themselves out, then you can kind of let your own spin attack a bunch of this inspiration, is what I would usually call it, versus stealing, or maybe borrowing might be the middle ground that I would use, where I might take some sort of, culture or deity or god or race from another piece of media and then put it into my own, put my own little spin on it and shoot it out. The only, I guess, like, what was the term I was using before? The little checkbox that I have to hit before I present it to the players is this different enough that they can engage with it believably, or are they going to immediately recognize it? And I guess that also probably applies to if you take the story element of like a movie. Like a very good example is if you take New Hope of Star Wars and you just copy that story beat by beat by beat and just replace the character names, someone at some point is going to recognize it and be like, oh, we're not playing D&D, we're playing A New Hope with, our characters placed in there. So that's, I guess, the bad way of going about such things.
I think that line that I talked about, where inspiration and homage is on one side and plagiarism is on the other, I think that is an example. Like, if you lift the entire plot of the first Star Wars movie and just change the names, that's a ripoff. That's and your players would be right to roll their eyes at you. Um, but you can absolutely think about what makes A New Hope a fun story and take those elements, remix them, put your own spin on them, and use them. That is good idea. Good idea, bad idea, right? Um,
Well, also, even your
and
players are going to help, like, differentiate what you've prepared. Like, unless you're railroading the absolute shit out of them, there's no way you're going to recreate the plot of A New Hope with your players interacting and engaging and altering the course.
also very true. Very good point. And I'm not advocating for trying to send your players down a funnel that recreates some book that you like. That's, but our viewers are smart enough to know that that's not what we mean. Right.
Hmm.
One of the dirty little secrets that I'm going to spoil for you now is that players desperately want to feel clever. They want to feel smart so bad. Uh, and what that means is that they're going to look for patterns that you haven't put in and be sure, they're going to be sure that they have found one. And even if you tell them, like, you can't tell them that they haven't, because first of all, you're spoiling things for them, and secondly, they'll never believe you.
Mhm.
They'll just think you're trying to throw them off the scent. So players are going to look for those things anyway. They're going to pull elements out of things that you do, and they're going to say, "Oh, that's just like this movie I watched." And you're going to be like, "I've never seen that. I've never heard of it. I came up with this, or this is how these pieces came together, uh, because man has been telling himself stories for several thousands of years now." So chances are that even if you just lock yourself in a room and say, I'm going to think of a totally original idea, somebody at the table, there's a good chance they'll be able to say, oh, that's that movie with that guy.
Mhm. The best way to be a secret mastermind is to let your players connect the dots and then be like, "Oh yeah, that's what I had planned all along. You're so smart. Thank you."
So rather than bend over backwards trying to be totally original, lean into it and take the things that entertain you or that intrigue you or that make you think, and just take those Lego pieces and put them together into something new, because that's totally legitimate, and you're going to end up with something really cool.
Yeah. When James first brought this subject to me, I really tried to sit down and think of like pieces of media that I've taken from, and I sat there and was like, I really love Lord of the Rings, or really enjoy Game of Thrones. Like there are obviously like fantasy pieces of media or worlds that I really enjoy. And I tried to find a spot in like a game that I've played or a universe that I've crafted where there was almost kind of like a one-to-one or a slight adjustment pull from, the main material to my material, and I really struggled to find it. And what I think I more or less do is I just consume an absolute spread of, not even just fantasy media, but just media in general. And whatever resonates with me, I try and vibe off of, or, add, or like Frankenstein in this mangled mess. And that's how I come up with the things that I enjoy, and then, make the world that I enjoy, and then let my players run around in it. The way that I eventually took this topic is, at least from a DM side, one of the things I really enjoy or rely heavily on to hopefully be a better DM is I will go and find D&D games online, like live play, YouTube or Twitch things. Critical Role and Dimension 20 are the two really easy ones to point towards. I would find ones that I enjoy, or at least ones that I enjoy like certain aspects of. Like my very good example that most everyone will understand is the way that Matthew Mercer explains scenery or sets a scene or like adjusts his voice to like convey the emotion that the player should be feeling at a certain time is exceptional, and it's really cool to watch. And then if you go over to Dimension 20, it's Brandon Lee Mulligan, I think is his name. Hopefully I'm getting that right. He is really good at stepping into characters and like switching from one character to the next and making them very distinct and different. And so I really enjoy watching that. So I will sit there and I will analyze it, and I will try and figure out maybe like the tricks or the mentality that they are using, and then emulate is the best word I think I can come up with on my side to then hopefully add to my skill set as a DM. So that would be the way that I steal or borrow or take inspiration, is not from a piece of media, but from watching other dungeon masters that I really respect and enjoy doing their craft, and then trying to recreate a fraction of their magnificence. So.
I think that's an important point. You're not. I want to stress here that you're not talking about doing an impression of Matt
Mhm.
Mercer. You're talking about asking yourself what is it that he does so well?
Mhm.
What is it that he is good at? What are the skills that he is displaying? So you're not trying to sound like Matt Mercer. You're trying to learn something about being a DM from Matt Mercer.
Mhm.
So I want to say right here, don't don't at me, don't at Nathan about the Mercer effect, okay?
Mhm.
It's not real, in my opinion. That's my hot take. There's no such thing. It is just the shorthand. It's the shortcut term that people latched onto to complain about something they didn't like about their personal gaming experience.
There is
Um,
an excellent skit done by XP to Level 3 about, I think it's titled something like a DM after watching one episode of Critical Role. And it basically plays up the fact that like someone comes back to their table trying to really like imitate Matthew Mercer by like doing all of his noises and his mannerisms and like really playing into that. And that again is an extreme example and done to comedic effect, but that's not what I'm trying to point towards. There are just pieces of his skill at being a DM that I really enjoy. I don't want to emulate, I want to incorporate into my own style, might be a good way of placing it. But yeah, that's a really funny video if you guys want to find that, because it very much kind of hits home of what we're kind of dancing around.
the three examples that I have of things that inspire me or that I will straight up steal from. The first I want to mention a TV show by the name of Xena Warrior Princess. Uh, I watched that show during a lovely time in my life, and can't recommend it enough. Go on eBay, get the Anchor Bay DVD set. That's the good one. Okay. Anyway, I'm naming that show, but there are so many shows that could just straight up be tabletop games. Whether Monster of the Week, Supernatural is a modern setting, but it's about a couple of monster hunters. That, or at least the earlier seasons are. I don't know what the hell it's about now, but the early seasons are about a couple of monster hunters traveling from town to town, fighting monsters. D&D, baby. Like, there's no way that you couldn't watch that and come away with something. Xena is just an earlier take of that same idea. Um, the sibling show Hercules Legendary Journeys. It's the same. Again, those two shows, they're the same show. They're the same show. It's the same basic story. It's just twists. It's variations on a theme. Those shows were on in neighboring time slots. First there was Hercules, and then Xena came on right after it, and they're the same show, but they got away with it because they varied the themes and incorporated some slightly different vibes and story beats. Um, so the TV shows and the movies that you're watching, they don't even have to be as on the nose as those are. Um, Characters that you like. You can say, this is a well-known technique. You're trying to create an NPC. This NPC is uh, Deadpool. His name isn't Deadpool, and he's not wielding guns or has a mask, but the attitude is Deadpool. And you just make that connection in your mind so that you know what this character is about without having to sit there and make some kind of bulleted list.
That actually
Deadpool's
is
really
something. Oh, sorry.
Deadpool's a bad example, so don't use Deadpool. That's just first thing that popped in my head because I saw it in a commercial before we started recording tonight. What were you gonna say?
That's actually something that I didn't really think of first, but really is something that I lean on quite heavily, is the NPCs, especially in my game. When I try to figure out what kind of personality I'm going to embody with them, sometimes it is as bare bones as like, oh, he is energetic, youthful, in your face, and charismatic. Like sometimes it's broken down to that point, but occasionally I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna play. I don't know, what's the disfigured guy from the Goonies, Glug, or what was his
Sloth?
name? Yeah, Sloth. That's it. I was like, oh yeah, this guy's gonna act like Sloth or move like Sloth, or any other variation of like a recognizable character in media, but it doesn't come out as like a straight one-to-one, because yes, I'm envisioning this person in my head, but my portrayal of that person is not going to be incredibly accurate. And as I'm playing and interacting with the players and also developing this character, if they're in the party sphere for a long period of time, they're going to find their own personality. They're going to kind of adjust to fit whatever groove they were kind of settling into. And so while again might have started off as Sloth, it might become something completely different, but that key jumping off point is something that you can use and take as like a source of creative fuel and then move forward from there. I do that quite a bit, so thought that'd be interesting to throw out there.
Yeah, absolutely. That is a great example. Um, the second sort of very broad example that I have is music,
Mhm.
songs, and again, any song. It doesn't have to be something that you would actually play during your game. You can use songs to create NPCs. There was this goofy game on the PlayStation 2 called Monster Rancher, and this is going to loop back. This is going to connect back,
Okay.
I promise. Um, so the way this worked, first of all, children, we used to have these things called CDs and DVDs, and they were shiny discs, shiny plastic discs that your music came on, and you played your music off of them in special devices that were made to play them. You could take these discs when you loaded Monster Rancher up on your PlayStation. You could then take a music disc and put it in your PlayStation while the game was still running, and it would generate a monster based off of the disc that you put in.
This is crazy. I've
And
never heard of this. This is
yeah,
awesome.
oh yeah, look it up, man. It's
Okay.
wild. It's wild. And what I think even in those days, like kids at school could trade their music CDs back and forth. Like, oh, this CD gives you a really cool monster. Take it home and put it in. So what I'm getting at is doing that in your mind with a song that you like today, with a song that you hear, you can picture the character in your game, the NPC in your game that might like this song or that this song could be about. Is this a helpful character? Is this a funny, bubbly character? Is this a villain? Is this like the song that the villain listens to when he's taking a shower? Like, you'd be surprised the depth that you can get for a character without trying, without even really trying, just by listening to a song and picturing in your mind the person that would like this song, the person for whom this would be their favorite song.
Mhm.
Um, Also, you can get plots and adventures, story hooks from songs. It's not even just limited to people. Lastly, a very specific example that I have is I'm running a game for our group. Sometimes I'm running a game for our group called Hot Springs Island. Uh, I highly recommend it. It's an adventure campaign setting that you can go buy wherever RPGs are sold. There we go. Um, Unaffiliated. They have nothing to do with us. But the thing that I liked about Hot Springs Island, the reason that I picked it, not even, I didn't write it, but the reason I picked it was because I was inspired by the Far Cry games. The Far Cry games have some very similar themes in every game. They're on like the seventh one now, six or seven. But there are some things that each game has in common in terms of being in a isolated location away from civilization. There's no help coming. You are on your own in a wild place, a place where the rules don't apply anymore. Stranger in a strange land, right? And where people have regressed to more basic and animal behaviors and tendencies. And those things really interested me as a setting. And so I went looking for something in the tabletop space that also had a lot of those things involved or in common. And I believe, in my opinion, that Hot Springs Island was a good match for that. I'm not saying that they based it on Far Cry. There's, not putting words in anybody's mouth, to be very, very clear. But for me personally, there was a lot of overlap there. And so that got me to buy that book and attempt to run it.
Kind of on the same vein, but slightly different. Also, the last thing that I'll toss out there is early on when I started DMing weekly, routinely over and over again, I started realizing that my descriptions were lacking a variety, right? Like everything was damp and dark and made of straight stone, and like I hadn't I guess, like taking a step back enough to broaden my descriptive terms or the scenes in my head. And so one thing I started doing, which isn't really stealing, but again more of like a another avenue of inspiration that you can use, is I would look up random fantasy scenes. I can even just go to Google search and type in like fantasy epic scenery or something of that sort, or fantasy dungeon room, and then describe that room that you're looking at as if you were to someone in a game. And it's pretty simple, and it's not anything super extraordinary, but it starts building that muscle of you having to find more precise terms to convey a different feeling, to try and, I mean, even just having that stimulation in your brain of like a desert town and an elven town and dense woodlands and open grasslands, like having that variety in your mind helps you produce more variety in your game. So that's another thing that I rely heavily on now, is like visual stimulation to help build up my, I don't know, creativity, and then trying to get that out as accurate or as alluring as possible with my words. I'm getting a little bit too artistic with it, but yeah, I very much leaned on that during the beginning of DMing. Well, I still do. So yeah.
There's always there's never a bad time to go back to the well, as it were, when you need a little something extra to get ready for the next session.
Mm.
So if there's nothing else, we certainly hope that you find this conversation, this video, inspiring. Let us know what inspires you and where you draw from in the comments down below, and like and subscribe while you're down there, of course.
Always
And
enjoy discourse with our videos, especially people that slightly agree with us but have a different take. I always appreciate those because it's interesting to hear other people's opinions on the same matter.
yeah, those of you who have been talking to us already recently, we appreciate you. For real. This is a real moment right now. Just wanted to let you know that. So come back next week for the next installment of Natural 2.
Hopefully, we'll have something adequately stimulating for you to listen to then.
Until next time.
Have a good one.